It begins with silence, not the silence of peace, but the kind that presses against your chest, as though something is listening in the darkness. Imagine an abandoned plantation house in Virginia, 1847. Its shutters hang loose, its fields unplanted, its soil barren. Yet townsfolk whisper that screams once echoed through those fields, screams no one dared acknowledge. The church would not speak of it. The county records are scrubbed clean, and those who lived long enough to remember claimed it was not the men with whips who committed the worst cruelties here, but the women in silk gowns. They called them the White Ladies. On the maps of antebellum Virginia, there is no record of this place. Plantation homes carried names, proud, boastful names like Montpelier or Belle Grove, but this one was different. Locals only referred to it as the house at the edge of the pines. Some believed it belonged to the Devereux family, others whispered the Chamberlains. What mattered was not the family name, but the ritual that went on behind those walls. Visitors never saw the fields tilled, never saw cotton bales loaded onto wagons. Instead, late at night, carriages bearing women in white dresses would arrive, their laughter echoing through the pine thickets. These were not balls nor gatherings of prayer, they were spectacles. The whispers claimed the women, wealthy, widowed, or daughters of planters, came not for music or dance, but for entertainment of another kind. Enslaved black men, chosen for their strength, their youth, or their silence, were brought before them. They were stripped, bound, and made into unwilling performers. Their suffering was staged as theater. A scream was applauded, a sob was mocked, and when the body broke, the women clapped as though the curtain had fallen on a show. And the men who owned these women, the husbands, the overseers, the preachers, turned their heads away, for this was a cruelty hidden under lace and perfume, too inconvenient to acknowledge, too profitable to expose. By 1852, strange patterns appeared in nearby counties. Young enslaved men would vanish, their names struck from the ledgers. Families whispered of sons taken in the night, of fathers who never returned from errands to neighboring plantations. When pressed, overseers gave vague explanations: an escape, a sale, a fever. But no one ever saw those men on auction blocks, nor heard of their arrival on other estates. Instead, they seemed swallowed by the house at the edge of the pines, as if the soil itself consumed them. The community knew something was wrong, but in the South of that era, silence was safer than truth. Descriptions of the women varied. Some said they were widows of Confederate officers, gathering in mourning. Others claimed they were daughters of planters, untouched by men and twisted by isolation. They were said to be pale, almost translucent, dressed always in white gowns that glowed against the dark pine backdrop. Town children began calling them the White Ladies, a name that stuck. In daylight, they seemed pious, attending church, donating hymnals, smiling gently at orphans. But when the lamps burned in the house at night, they revealed themselves as something far more sinister, predators who turned torture into ritual. The local church, St. Augustine's, was said to be complicit in its silence. Priests blessed the women, preached of their generosity, and called them angels of charity. The women supplied hymnals, stitched altar cloths, and sang with devotion on Sundays. Yet by night, they orchestrated scenes of torment. The contradiction was deliberate. The more saintly they appeared in daylight, the less anyone dared to believe the whispers of their nightly gatherings. It was an unholy duality, a mask of piety covering the hunger of sadists. Survivors, though very few, spoke of a chamber known only as the White Room. It was not painted white. Instead, its walls were covered in cloth, so the blood could be easily absorbed and later discarded. A man would be brought in, bound and displayed like a specimen. The women would sit in a circle, sipping sweetened wine, their voices calm as they gave instructions to the overseer. One demanded the breaking of a finger. Another wanted to hear a song forced through pain. They choreographed the suffering as though it were theater, each woman playing the role of both conductor and spectator. It was not only physical torment. The women were fascinated by breaking a man's will. They whispered lies into his ear, telling him his family had abandoned him, his God had forsaken him. His own body was nothing but an object to be wasted. They made men beg, then mocked the begging. They forced laughter at the sound of sobs. In this, their cruelty was refined, not an explosion of violence, but a slow unraveling of identity. Their joy was not in death, but in dismantling the human spirit piece by piece. One of the most disturbing elements of the story is the rumor that the women raised orphan girls within the plantation grounds. These girls, dressed in miniature gowns of white, were trained to watch the performances in silence. They were not participants, but apprentices, children raised to see cruelty as ritual, entertainment, even inheritance. When they grew older, some became white ladies themselves, perpetuating the cycle. Generational trauma twisted into tradition. By 1870, after the Civil War, nearly all written evidence of this plantation disappeared. County records were burned in courthouse fires, family names dissolved into obscurity. Photographs, if they ever existed, vanished. It is as though history itself conspired to erase the house at the edge of the pines, but oral memory endured. Formerly enslaved families passed down warnings, speaking of the white ladies in hushed tones. They taught their children to avoid certain roads, certain woods, to never trust the glow of lantern light among the pines. Even after the plantation was abandoned, the soil refused to yield. Crops planted there withered. Sharecroppers reported hearing cries at dusk, voices calling their names. They abandoned the land, declaring it cursed. Locals avoided it except for curious travelers who occasionally vanished without trace. To this day, the field remains barren. Farmers say the ground rejects seed because it is already fed, with something deeper than blood. In 1881, Reverend Charles Langston, a traveling preacher, investigated the rumors. He denounced the white ladies as serpents in lace and vowed to expose their crimes. Days later, he vanished. His horse was found tethered near the pines, still saddled, still waiting. His Bible lay open in the dirt. His body was never recovered. Locals believed the white ladies had claimed him, and his disappearance sealed their legend. No preacher ever dared challenge them again. Around the same time, whispers connected the plantation to a nearby orphanage run by pious women. Records suggest that young girls adopted into the house were listed as vanished or placed in good homes. Some say these children were never seen again. Others believed they became the next generation of white ladies. The institutions, the church, the orphanage, the county court, all seemed to collaborate in silence, allowing the cycle to continue unchecked. By the turn of the century, the town itself began to forget. Locals no longer spoke of the white ladies openly, though unease lingered. When newcomers asked about the abandoned house, elders deflected. The silence became an inheritance, passed down like an heirloom. Better to bury the past than risk stirring it, but buried secrets do not stay hidden, they rot and the stench seeps through time. In 1904, a diary surfaced in a courthouse auction. Believed to belong to Clara Devereux, it contained chilling entries. She wrote not of crops or weather, but of performances, of her delight in orchestrating the breaking of men. She described the white room, the children in white gowns, the way she believed pain cleansed the spirit. The diary was purchased by a private collector, then disappeared. Some believe it still exists, hidden in a collection no one dares display. By the 1920s, locals claimed to see apparitions, pale women in gowns drifting through the pine groves at dusk. Travelers swore they heard faint laughter in the woods, followed by cries that were not quite human. Farmers abandoned their fields, declaring that the white ladies had returned, not as women of flesh, but as spirits bound to the land, feeding on anyone foolish enough to wander too close. Modern historians rarely mention the house at the edge of the pines. Records are sparse, diaries gone, oral accounts dismissed as folklore. Some say universities refused to study it, calling it superstition. Others claim institutions buried the truth, unwilling to face the horror that women of status and piety could orchestrate atrocities equal to or greater than their husbands. Silence became protection, not for the victims, but for the perpetrators. In 1938, workers clearing land for a logging company discovered bones near the plantation site. Dozens of skeletons, all male, many bearing marks of restraint. The company quickly covered the findings, declaring them animal remains. But those who saw the bones knew otherwise. The graves were unmarked, unrecorded, a mass burial of silenced men whose suffering was never meant to be remembered. To this day, the land remains abandoned. Locals refuse to build upon it, farmers refuse to till it. Travelers claim their radios cut out near the pines, their compasses spin, their shadows lengthen unnaturally. The house itself has long since rotted, but the air carries weight, as though every scream still lingers, stitched into the soil, bound by the laughter of women who called themselves angels by day, but demons by night. The story of the White Ladies is not merely about one plantation, one house, or one group of women. It is about what happens when cruelty is allowed to hide behind lace, hymnals, and piety. It is about institutions that chose silence over truth. It is about trauma so deep it poisoned the land itself. And perhaps, most horrifying of all, it is about the possibility that this story is not unique, that countless other houses, countless other ladies, remain hidden in history's shadows, their secrets buried but not destroyed. The house at the edge of the pines may be forgotten by record, but in the soil, in the whispers, and in the silence, it still breathes.